My name is Juliana Nykolaiszyn with the Oklahoma State University Library. Today is Monday, July 16th, 2007, and I'm in Stillwater, Oklahoma on the campus of Oklahoma State University in the Angie DeBow Room, interviewing Della Warrior. This interview is being conducted as part of the inductees of the Oklahoma Women's Hall of Fame Oral History Project. Ms. Warrior was inducted into the Oklahoma Women's Hall of Fame in 2007. She served as the first and only woman elected as Chairperson and Chief Executive Officer of the Otoe-Missouria tribe in Red Rock, Oklahoma. She also served as President of the Institute of American Indian Arts in Santa Fe, New Mexico from 1998 until 2006. With extensive experience in education within Native American communities, Ms. Warrior continues to advise and assist many organizations, including serving on the Board of Trustees of the National Museum of the Native American Indian. Thank you so much for joining us today, Ms. Warrior.
It's good to be here.
Let's begin by learning a little more about you. Could you tell us where you grew up and give a little background on your early life?
Well, I grew up in both very rural settings and in very urban settings. I was born in Pawnee, Oklahoma, and my family resided in Red Rock, Oklahoma. So I spent my early years at Red Rock, Oklahoma, and my mother and stepfather we lived in many other cities in Oklahoma, as well as California and Texas and Kansas. We lived in actually Shawnee and Tulsa and Oklahoma City and Enid and Ponca City. And then we lived in Dallas and Wichita and Los Angeles. And it seemed like my family, we would go and my stepfather would be employed, but my mother always would get lonesome for home. So we did move around a lot. So I grew up in many of the cities in Oklahoma, as well as rural communities in Oklahoma, and spent a little time in some major metropolitan areas for a part of that. So I grew up in kind of seeing a diversity in the type of communities where we lived. And it was difficult at times because I felt often just as we got settled and I made new friends, then we'd be time to leave. So many of my friends from those other communities, they're not lifelong friends, with the exception of those in Red Rock, and then the ones that I met at the universities that I attended.
When you were younger, did you move around from school to school?
I did. When I was in, I think I averaged every year from the first through the fifth or sixth grade, we moved at least twice a year. I started out my first time in at school, elementary school, was at the Pawnee Indian School in Pawnee, Oklahoma. I attended there for one semester. I have to take a drink of water here. And then junior high, probably at least 2 schools a year. And in high school, I remember I went to 6 different high schools. So often I think, how did I ever manage to get my high school diploma? But I did.
What were some of your favorite subjects when you were in school?
Well, I liked to read a lot, and we didn't have, I know my aunt was the first one in the community of Red Rock to have a television. So at other times, and I was like 9 or 10, I remember. And so I got used to reading a lot. And since we moved around a lot, that was part of my recreation, and going into different worlds was through reading. Every weekend I would check out 3 or 4 books and read those, over the weekend. So I think it was most likely my subjects were literature and history. Those were the favorite ones. And at different times I liked math, depending on how difficult I thought it was.
Now, outside of school, I know you moved around a lot, but what did you like to do for fun outside of reading?
Well, we were always very involved with the church. So a lot of our activities, I went to church a lot, and then I belonged to the Rainbow Girls. But I enjoyed tennis and basketball, swimming, and skating, and dancing. I liked to do all of those activities.
Roller skating or ice skating?
Roller skating, but I did try ice skating in high school, and that was a lot of fun. But I tried it when my two older daughters were in the elementary school. I went with them a couple of times, and it was a major challenge.
Now, as you started to progress in life, you're going to school and you're thinking about what you want to be when you get older. How did you imagine your life? What road did you think it was going to take? What did you want to be when you were growing up?
Well, I made up my mind when I was early, maybe in junior high, that I wanted to be a medical doctor. And so I was on a pre-college track, throughout high school, preparing to go into pre-med. But that was largely growing up in my community, which was predominantly Native people. Were a large part of the population, and my elders, my mother and my aunts and uncles and my extended family, they were always encouraging me to go to school and to get an education, to be able to do something that would help, where I could make a contribution to my fellow tribal members and to do something to help them improve their life situation. So there was always this big emphasis was to get an education, to go to school, and to be able to do something for my people and to help my people.
Do you think that a lot of families within the Native American culture try to impart that to their children, to give back to their community?
Yes, I do. I think that's a big part of the culture, because in the Native culture, in the Otoe culture, it's, families help one another a lot, and they do a lot of things together, and so they do really stress education.
Okay. Can you tell me, when you were younger, some of your role models or who you looked up to during that time?
When I was younger, I believe for the most part it was, my mother and my aunts and some of my extended family members, because they were strong women, and they were always teaching and advising and counseling about life. And so I think it was, primarily the, for my family members, what I saw them trying to do and how they struggled and how they managed with what little they had, and that they always wanted a better life, for me, as well as, my cousins and others in the family.
So the role your family played in your life was very important growing up. Tell me about the role in your family life's role now in your life. Is that important to you?
Well, now I'm, all of those, the elders in my family, I'm the second to the eldest in my huge extended family. So I am the matriarch now. So I'm constantly, talking to the younger, to the children and grandchildren, and through our extended family. Well, my cousins, their children are my grandchildren. So now I find myself, even though I think, well, I'm not really an elder, I don't feel like I'm wise enough to be an elder, but I am. So I try to remind myself to always impart something to the younger people coming up, and to be encouraging and to be positive.
What types of advice do you find yourself giving to the younger generations now?
Well, that they have to, set goals, to just think about, what it is they want to be, or what do they want in life, and to start thinking about that, and to start, planning for their future, and that whether they realize that or not, they are the future leaders, and we want them to be leaders, and we want them to get the knowledge and the skills so that they can help their native communities, whichever community, if that's, the Otoe-Missouria tribe or the Poncas, or when I was, in education, a lot of that was very similar, talking to these young people and, giving them advice and encouragement, and to work hard, that, that nothing comes easy, and they have to be motivated, and they have to really, strive and want to do the best that they can, whether it may not be, to their capabilities, always telling them that at whatever level you are, just do your best, whether it's in school or basketball or at home. Always try your best, and to be positive.
Can you describe, let's move now to your collegiate years. You went to school in Tahlequah at Northeastern State back in the 60s. Can you describe your collegiate experience back then?
Well, I think my freshman year was very, it was the first time, like, many other hundreds of thousands of students, they go away to college and you're on your own. So you go through this adjustment period on how, how to be disciplined, and how to do your work, and how to, when to socialize, and to balance. It's a balancing process. You've got to learn to really balance your schedule. But it was very exciting, and I formed some of my lifelong friends there, and I did very well the first year. Then the second year was just kind of average, and then after the third year, I did very well again, their third and fourth years. But in college, it was very difficult because my family didn't really have any resources to help me. And so when I was, in my second year, it got really difficult with all the, the pre-med courses, and then just not having sufficient, funding and resources. I had to take a job, and it was just really difficult to juggle that. And so I did end up switching my major in my third year. But it wasn't only because of finances. After I finished my second year, I went to this summer workshop at the University of Colorado. And it was the workshop on American Indian Affairs, where there were 36 young Indian college students from all over the country. Some tribes that I had never heard of, Alaska Natives, people from Maine, the Passamaquoddies, people from California, the Northern Plains, New Mexico and Arizona. And it was just such a diverse tribal group. And the courses that we took, we stayed in this fraternity house, and we took 6 hours in social science. And for the first time, for all of us, we were given a review of American Indian history, from a Native perspective, even though for the most part they're only two of the faculty were Native, but it really talked about federal Indian policy and what happened after European contact and how this influenced Native people. And so it was a real eye-opener for me, because I used to wonder, well, very early when I was in, say, 10, 11, and 12, that in my little community there and the surrounding communities, there weren't very many jobs, and the few businesses there were all, none of them were owned by Native people. And of course all the teachers and nurses and doctors were not natives. Only the custodians and secretaries and the laborers on the farm were from my tribal communities. And I used to wonder about that. Well, why is that? Why don't we have Native teachers, or why don't we have doctors and nurses? And my mother and them would say, well, that's why you need to get an education, because we're progressing. So now when you need to go to school, and you can be one of those. You can be, in business, or you can be a teacher or doctor or whatever, but you have to go to school. And I remember thinking about that. Well, why is that? And then I remember thinking a lot of the problems I saw were because of poverty and the lack of employment, and how that really impacted a lot of people. Maybe I didn't think about it at that time, but when I went to the workshop, I could see how this change and how it impacted the culture. And then at the time, there was a lot of discrimination against Native people, a lot. So it was hard to be a Native person in Oklahoma. And you struggled with that, and you struggled with the stereotypes, and you had to walk almost in two worlds as a marginal person. And so just doing that, it was a struggle, but I developed a lot of pride in being a Native American and who I am and my own family. So that made me a stronger person. And I didn't, give in and give up. And I think that's the problem, is a lot of young people give up because they let others define who they are when they go into the outside world. Anyway, my main point was this experience was gave me a different perspective, because I used to think, what is wrong with us as Indian people? Why can't we be more successful? Why are we at the bottom of the ladder? Why? So when I went to the workshop, then I had a better understanding of what happened and why Native people were the way they were. And so I wanted to try to make a difference and try to change that. But it was this workshop that was very influential, and that workshop went on for about 10 years, and probably there must have been, during that time, close to 400 students that went through those workshops. And I would say 75% of them have been in major leadership positions, whether it's in law and government, health or education, community service, the academic field. The majority of the Indian people that went to this workshop, it was a life-changing experience.
After Tahlequah, in 1971, you obtained a degree at Harvard University. Mm-hmm. Now, how did you choose Harvard?
They chose me.
They chose you?
Mm-hmm. That was the time when the Office of Economic Opportunity had been established. I think that was established probably 69 or 70. And they had what they called an Indian desk out of OEO. And there was a person there, Dr. Jim Wilson, who is Oglala Sioux and from Pine Ridge, South Dakota. And he funded Harvard and Penn State and the University of Minnesota, the graduate schools, because they realized at this time that with all the schools and the Bureau of Indian Affairs and other schools where Native students were, there were no professionals, as principals or superintendents, and they wanted to try to make an impact at that upper hierarchy of education. So Dr. Wilson funded these 3 graduate schools in education to offer degree programs. Well, they weren't new programs, they were their existing programs, but they funded, at Harvard we had 11 students, and I'm not sure how many were at Penn State or Minneapolis. And so that, in fact, when I received a letter and an application, I didn't apply because I thought, Harvard? I can't afford to go to Harvard, and I'm not academically astute, and there's just no way I'm not a real brain or genius, so I didn't apply. And then I think I got a phone call, and they said, well, the way they had invited people to apply was based on people that had been out of college for a couple of years and who were doing work that they thought was very oriented towards community development. They'd been out in the field for a while, and at the time, my late husband and I had ran a summer program for middle school students, Native students, and had set that up because we felt that was the critical time to try to get these students motivated, because after that is when they started in the 9th, 10th grade, then a lot of them dropped out. So we started running a summer program, and I think at the time I got invited, I was also running an Upward Bound program at Northern Oklahoma College. So they invited people that were already out there doing, leadership kinds of running leadership educational programs or educational leadership programs. And I got this call, and so they said, well, you should really think about it. And so then when it came, I got another application, I applied, and I didn't expect to, to be accepted, but I was. There were 11, and these were students from, again, they were a diverse tribal group. And it was a, very, very wonderful experience, but it was also, very, very challenging. And I remember thinking, they made us feel, we took the regular classes that they had, the graduate programs, but they treated you so much different than and of course it could been this way in other graduate programs, because when you're in college, the classes are so big and so impersonal, and you feel a lot of times that there's no interaction with the professors. But at Harvard, our classes were, anywhere from 10 to 15 students. So you had, time to really to interact and to voice your opinions and to be listened to and treated with respect. And they treated you like you were smart. And I just thought, wow, just what would happen to our educational systems if all of the teachers treated all of the students like they were really smart. We'd have a wonderful society if you started with a younger group of students. So that really motivates you, because I can tell you the classes I went to, they handed out these reading lists. I mean, pages and pages and pages, and besides your textbook. And I said to someone in the classroom, I said, do they expect us to read all of this? And I said, you better read them all. So I had taken, in preparation the summer, as part of that program, they had us come up for the summer, and we took a speed reading course and a writing course just to get ready for the fall. but it motivates you because they treat you like you're smart, and there's no way that you're going to fail. And the whole attitude is, if you've been accepted by Harvard, you've got to be smart because they don't make a mistake. So it makes you work super, super, super hard. And I think now, how did I do that at that time? But I had my mother was with me, and so she took care of my 2 young daughters. So I had time to study and to get my papers done and meet the requirements. But it was quite exhilarating and quite challenging.
Did the students, the tribal students who went to Harvard with you, did you guys all hang around together?
We did.
Okay.
We were our own support group, but we met a lot of other minority students as well as non-minority students. So we interacted with a lot of other people too. But we did, we spent a summer together in the dormitory, and then in the fall, we lived all over in different suburbs and wherever we found a place to live with our families. But we still periodically, got together, and then we had a house where the American Indian program was housed, and they had it's called the Reed House. It was the old, one of the first buildings on the Harvard campus. So that was a place we could go and gather and have lunch together, or just meet up with one another and go from there. So that was good to have that support group. Plus we had good funding, and that made a big difference. Because I would have never had the funds. My family wouldn't have had the funds to send me to Harvard at all. But I have to say that with that, the Harvard program at the Graduate School of Education and the other programs, they trained a lot of Native Americans to go into education, whether it's at the college, at the university level, or superintendents and principals. So they're out there. A couple of them became state school people in charge of the education for the state. So we had an opportunity, and I think we were individually successful, but we were also successful for Native people, because there were a lot of firsts out of that group.
You were able to again bring the education back to your own communities.
Yes, we were. Several of the individuals started their own Native American schools. They contracted them from the Bureau, and they developed them where you had true Indian leadership with Native boards, and they influenced the curriculum. And so today, a lot of the schools, the students are doing much better, where they have a voice at all levels of the school systems.
Did you find that there were more males versus females in those programs?
Let's see. We had four women and seven males. So there were almost twice as many at that time.
Do you think that's a barrier, or that was a barrier back then? Were women encouraged to step out there and earn these types of degrees within their communities?
I think that there was more pressure in terms of expectations put on the males than there were on the females. Then there now in today's world, I think there's I know with the tribal college presidents, when I first became a tribal college president, there were 4 of us women presidents, and the rest, they were all male. So there were like 25 male presidents. And that was 9 years ago or 10 years ago now. And at this time, I think there are about at least almost half of the presidents of the Native colleges are female.
Now you've had quite a career. You've spent 35 years working in education, governance, community relations, you name it, you've been there. Can you highlight some of the key positions you've held over the years?
Well, I think I've had, my first job was right out of college. I became the director of social services for Head Start for 6 counties in Kansas. And that was a real learning experience. Working with the community members, the mothers and the children and the fathers, just trying to, make sure that the students were going to Head Start and deal with truancy and all those kinds. So the jobs, I think I had from the time I was out of college after I graduated were all kind of learning experiences. And then I spent some time doing research and evaluation for programs, Native programs. But my first really, I think, big job, in quotes, big, was I was the director of Indian education for Albuquerque Public Schools. And it was a huge school district. We had 117 schools with about 3,300 Indian students from over 100 tribes. So it was trying to figure out how to get services to these students who were spread out in these 117 schools. And I remember I was so traumatized when I took that job. I wanted the job, and I didn't expect to get it. And when I did get the job, I thought, well, now what am I going to do? I was traumatized, and I felt all the responsibility, and, well, I don't know how to be the director of this program. I don't know how to do this. And my friend, I'll never forget, he said, well, now, Della, you've gone to school all these years, and you've had all this experience, and you'll know what to do. So don't be afraid, just go and do it. And so it turned out very, very well. And we ended up having some wonderful success with the students there, and working with the parents and getting them involved with the school system, and running tutoring and having counseling and a lot of activities for the students, and focusing on reinforcement for them and helping them, learn to accept who they were and to be very proud of that. So that was, I really enjoyed that job. And then the same thing when I was the chairman of the Otoe-Missouria tribe, I felt, well, I'm not trained to deal with roads and transportation and environmental problems and health and safety. My background is education and community development. But then after I got in there, it was the same. You've got to develop a plan. You have to set goals. You have to get buy-in, and but if you have a plan, you just move everything along. But of course, my very best job was as the president of the college in New Mexico, the Institute of American Indian Arts, where it was just wonderful to see the growth of these college students from when they first arrived and when they graduated, and to help the school build a new campus and to move from a 2-year to a 4-year program. It was just very, very rewarding. And I think the most rewarding part was to see these students just bloom.
Now you've been very fortunate, with your educational opportunities. So I'm not sure if you're going to answer this question one way or another, but we're going to take a stab at it. Tell me about some of the most important places you learned the background you needed for your various jobs that you've had.
The most important places. Let me think about that. Well, I think that what your college, when you're going to the university and taking the various courses, they are not there to really teach you how to do the job, but they give you all of the foundation so that you can begin to think about how to do the jobs. And then when you finally start, you've got to use everything you'd have read and learned about, or how to research and to do your job. So every job that I have had has been a growth and learning experience. It helped me move, to get a better job as I increased it was almost like hands-on learning through the different jobs that I've had. And the job that I had as president of the college in Santa Fe, I thought, well, I had never aspired to be a college president, but I believe that all of the jobs that I've had before when I used to do research and program evaluation, writing grants, coordinating programs, being a counselor, all of these kinds of sets of experiences that I had in my jobs, they gave me all the skills that I needed to be a college president, which, was wonderful. It was wonderful because I thought, well, it's like I've been in training all my life to do this, to be a college president, and where I never aspired to do that. But I had to do fundraising along the way. I learned how to do, private sector fundraising as well as, the federal and state side. I learned public relations, human relations, community development, grassroots development, economic development. All of these kinds of things prepared me to be a college president.
How did running for elected office come about with the Otoe-Missouria tribe?
My mother. I was I was still working at Albuquerque Public Schools, and she had moved home, and of course she was getting up in age, and she had said, well, you really, you need to come home and work with your own people. That's why you went to school, to work with your own people, and you've never done that. And you've been out there working with other tribes and other Native communities, and you're doing some good work. But, that's why you went to school. So, and I said, well, I know, but I'm helping, the students here, and I like what I'm doing, and I enjoy it. And so anyway, I thought about that. And I thought about it more, and it's just like a little thing. Everyone's, well, she's right. She's right. You never did work with your own tribe. So I moved home, and then I ran for. Well, the first term I was appointed as a member. So I served as a member for 3 years, and then was asked by several tribal members to run, and I ran, and I ran against 4 male tribal members, and I was the youngest, and I won. And so again, I was traumatized. So that's how I was motivated to move back, because it was like I felt I set out to do something and I never fulfilled my obligation, and that was a commitment I made, and I felt, and I had always known it, but I just kept putting it off and putting it off and putting it off. So then she planted the seed, and it grew, and then I felt responsible that I had to take that step.
Is it common for women to be put in these types of positions within tribal organizations?
No, not at all. It has, within the last 10 years, we've seen more women in leadership roles, on the tribal council, or even being elected to tribal council. But before that, it was not. It was just something that women should not do, and they had their role in place, and that was the men's role to be the leaders. So I would say that within the past 10 years, the number of women leaders has probably quadrupled.
Wow. What would be the traditional role for a woman to take instead of, staying away from elected office? What would be that set role that they are supposed to fill?
To be the caregiver and to be the homemaker and to be in that role, but not to be in a leadership role, because that was the men's role. And I took a lot of flack for that. I was elected, but then I think it's just part of the tradition and the culture. There were a lot of people that felt, well, we shouldn't have a woman, it's not a woman's place to be leading the tribe. So there was always that resistance as a woman, that it was just culturally inappropriate.
What were some of your successes working with the tribe?
With the tribe? Mm-hmm. Well, we had 10 goals, and we made progress on all of those goals, which was to increase employment, to have additional programs, to have more educational opportunities, and to increase our land base, and to try and create employment opportunities. So with those, we were able, the tribe began to buy land back. We had we developed our own water utility company. That was the goal. And I left before it was ever implemented, but that is really a bread and butter project for the tribe, to have their own utility company and to have their own water program, and that brings revenue into the tribe. We set up our own tax commission, and that was doing really well, and it still is doing well, but it took a lot of time for people to understand it. At first there was a great deal of opposition because it was different, it was new, and there were a lot of misperceptions. People thought that the purpose of that was to create a tax program that would tax the native people there on their land. And that wasn't the intent of it. It was for businesses, that they would be taxed and that money would come into the tribal government and support the government, just like any other, city or county or state or federal government. You have various taxes for different kinds of services. So those were successful. I started a lot, and we had made progress, but I was there as the chair for just about 4 years, so I didn't really get to accomplish as much as I wanted. And I do want to say, for future generations that might research this, is that it's really difficult being it is being a tribal leader, period, but working with your own tribe is more difficult than working for another tribe. There are so many more barriers set up, and a lot of that has to do with, it could have to do with animosities that go back 100 years with family feuds or whatever. It goes to a lot of mistrust against the federal government, but also against their own tribal government, because they're suspicious and they feel that anybody gets in those positions are going to be corrupt. So you're constantly having to defend yourself and put out small crises and fires, and that really detracts from your roadmap, where you want to go and what you want to do, because you're always trying to, explain and defend. And I had one recall, and then when I was just a member, we went through an ouster. And on both cases, I fought back, because I felt that the only thing I had in this world was my name and my reputation. And I was not going to just go and be run off because of a lot of untruths and downright lies and wrong information. So that I felt in order to clear my name, I had to fight, and I did. And so when we went to court, they had no facts, they had no data, it was all lies and innuendos, and they even falsified the recall petition. People had signed for other people, they put on people's names who were deceased. They didn't have enough to go through that recall, so it was thrown out of court. And it was very expensive, but I felt all I have is, if I don't have a good reputation, a good name, then I have nothing. So I did fight. It's very difficult to work for your own tribe.
Sounds like the makings for a very good book.
I should have kept should have kept a journal, because it was sometimes I felt like I'm not here in America, I'm in some foreign nation here. The way things are, it was kind of bizarre.
Can you go into detail about a key moment in your career, in any position you've held, where you consider that moment to be one of your biggest highlights?
My biggest highlights?
Mm-hmm.
Let me see. Well, I think it's hard to say which highlight. I would say...
And if you have more than one.
Oh, okay.
Sure.
All right. Well, I think it was when we moved from these World War II barracks, moved our college from these barracks that they had been in for 17 years on another campus, renting substandard space for 17 years. And they had dreamed about their own campus for years. And we worked on that, and we were able to finally raise funds and to develop the architectural plans and to build our own campus. So when we had the dedication of the new campus, that was a big highlight. And it was certainly rewarding to me for the school to get, for the first time, 10-year accreditation from the accrediting body, which it had not. In fact, when I first took over, the school was on probation. And then we came off that and we got 5 years, and then we were able to have 10-year accreditation. But I think the last year, the most rewarding time at the campus was we received a $16 million gift from the W.K. Kellogg Foundation to build a lifelong learning center. So that was a monumental experience to know that we had been successful in getting that. And I think, to my knowledge, that it was the biggest gift that any tribal college or any Indian organization has ever received from the private sector. So that was quite an experience.
Now, at the Institute of American Indian Arts, what is the student population, and what types of programs do you offer there?
There are just a little over 200 students, and we offer programs in museum studies, creative writing, Native American studies, and the arts.
All right.
The fine arts.
Oh, moving on to the honor, which we're going to talk to you a little more about today. When you were notified that you were going to be inducted into the Oklahoma Women's Hall of Fame, tell me what was going through your mind at that time.
Well, I just couldn't believe it. I just thought, well, I just can't. Is this for real? I can't believe that I'm selected when there are so many wonderful women doing some great things. And is my work, my work? I didn't really think that it was at such a level that I would, get the award. So the only thing I thought was, well, it must be my life's work, not just any one huge thing that I've done. You get this for this, but over a 40-year period, I guess I've made a few contributions. But it's quite awesome.
Your efforts that you've done within your community and within the outside community, and both in Oklahoma and in New Mexico, you give all women something to look up to and to emulate. How do you feel that now people look at you as a role model today?
Well, I know that my tribe, they came out in huge numbers for the event. They turned out, and a lot of other tribal people. And I know that there were others that wanted to come, but the weather was bad. I think that they just, for my own tribe, I believe they were just in wonder, and very, very happy and very proud to know that a tribal member could, receive this honor. So they related to that, and I know that, I've heard them tell their, their grandchildren and children, and to say to them that, I had received this recognition, and that I was a tribal member, and that they too, if they worked hard, they could, they wanted them to be like me. Is what I've heard that a number of times.
Can you tell me something about the people you would like to thank that have helped played an important role in your life?
Well, my mother is deceased, but I think, it's appropriate that I mention my mother and my Katie Carson and my Aunt Larry Carson and my uncles Sam and Frank Carson. And also, my grandparents, even though I never knew them, I'm named after my grandmother, and she was a traditional healer, and she was a Christian, and she brought up her children, in to be Christians, and she always encouraged education. In fact, I've felt often lately that I felt bad that I don't speak my own native language. But at the time, her and my grandfather decided that they would not teach their children the language because they didn't want them to be punished or mistreated. So they made that decision. But often I go other places, and a lot of people my age still are fluent in their native language. And so the lessons that I was taught by my aunts and uncles and mother was that, this is what your grandparents wanted for you, and they're always, kind of advising me and teaching me. I would also want to thank Dr. Robert K. Thomas. He passed away, I believe it was in 1995 or somewhere around there. He was one of my professors that was like a mentor. And in my different times in my careers, I would call him and say, what do you think about this? Or in my tribal challenges there. And he would help me analyze and think things through, and some other really, good friends that I have. And there's just a lot of people that have really mentored and helped me throughout my whole life. And as I said, I have to thank God for all of the blessings that I've had in life that have, He's always been there, and I've always called on Him and, looked to Him for guidance. So that spirituality that was handed down from, my grandparents and parents have helped me be what I am and who I am.
If you could give any piece of advice to fellow Oklahomans, what would you tell them?
Well, I think I would tell them that they need to pay attention to what their children are being exposed to, and to teach them basic spiritual values about what it is to be a human being and the responsibilities that go along with that, and to be positive and encouraging, and to work hard at whatever it is they're doing.
What would be your advice to women who plan to follow in your footsteps?
To be strong, to have courage, to not let fear overwhelm them, to take risks, because everyone out there, for the most part, many of them feel the same way that they do. But you've just got to take that step and to just do it, because you'll be all right. Everything will fall in place. But don't let fear overwhelm you where you don't take that first step. That's the biggest thing, is you worry about, can I do this? And you question, your own abilities and the appropriateness of it and the why. And a lot of times women talk themselves out of things, but not to be afraid.
When history is written about you, what would you like for it to say?
That I was a Otoe-Missouria American Indian. I was a member of that tribe. That I was the first one in my extended family to graduate from high school, first one to graduate from college, and I think the only tribal member that graduated from Harvard. And so beyond that, I think I would like my history to say that I was dedicated to improving the life situation for not only my tribe, but all Native people. And that was my driving force in life. And that I tried to, or that I did manage to be a Native person, but still to get educated and to be successful. I think a lot of times Native people feel that they're going to have to give up being Indian if they go to school, and they're going to have to be something else, and they don't want to do that. But that you can be a Native person, you can go to school, and you can come back to your community and make a difference. And that I tried to go by the cultural beliefs and values of my people. And I guess, that's basically it.
What is next on the agenda for Della Warrior? What do you think you'll be doing in the next few years?
Well, I'm still right now working on some education and economic development projects. One for the Ford Foundation. They are considering developing funding with some seed money, a National Native Arts and Cultural Foundation, which would support and nurture organizations and artists that are involved with Native arts and culture, because there has been a lot of our culture that has been lost and languages that have been lost. So this fund will fund artists as well as organizations that are trying to maintain the culture, whether it be in language preservation or protecting, cultural rights, and helping different organizations and tribes really have the culture be much stronger than what it is today. I mean, it's stronger now than it was, 20 years ago, but not as strong as it was 50 years ago. So to begin to rediscover what some of that knowledge was. I'm working with them on that and helping to raise money to get the foundation up to $50 million. I'm working with the Hopi tribe, with one of the villages out there on an economic development project. And I'm working with a tribe in Northern California to help them restore their balance, their sense of community, because they were dispersed in the urban population. Now because they have gaming, they're living as a tribe, but they don't know how to be a tribe. So we're trying to help them move in that area and to rediscover their own identity. And I'm working with Wilma Mankiller, and we're doing some projects together. And I'll probably do this for 2 more years, and then I'm going to move back to Oklahoma. And then I have some projects that I want to do with my own tribe. Not be employed at the tribe, but with the youth, in programs that will help to motivate and inspire them, and also to begin a language project for my tribe. That's what I'm thinking about. And there's so many things I think, I'd like to do that, and I don't know. I'm always wanting to do more, but I'm having less energy. So.
Well, it's 2007 now. Do you feel cultural and social perceptions of the Native Americans have changed over the years?
Definitely. I have seen so many changes. For example, when I first went to college, there weren't very many students at the University of Oklahoma, Native students. I think there were maybe 50. And now, today, I'm told there's there's over 1,000, maybe 1,500 to 2,000. So just more Natives are going to college and getting education, and they're learning more. They're not only going into business and teaching, they've gone into law. Many of them, they're in so many different areas, and you can go to conferences now, and a lot of Native people have their own businesses, and they're using technology, and there's just so much flourishing with the culture that you see that wasn't there when I was growing up. So there's been a lot of positive changes in terms of the culture really not only just being revived, but actually flourishing. So there's a lot of changes in this area. And over the last 40 years, Indian people are also running their own schools and their own programs, which I know when I was growing up, my own tribe, they didn't run anything. The only business the tribal council had was to decide which farmer was going to get to lease their land. And so with the struggles that we've had for Indian self-determination, the Indian Education Act, to get Indians more in control of their own programs. I remember Clyde saying in one of his speeches that, let us make our own mistakes. Right now, the Bureau of Indian Affairs runs everything. We don't get to make any decisions. We don't get to make any choices. We're wards of the federal government, and that's keeping us disempowered. So there was all this voice went around in the 60s that we need to make our own choices and own decisions, and we need to learn. And he said, after all, we can't do any worse than the federal government has had. And sure, we're going to make mistakes, but we're going to learn from those mistakes. So now you go to any tribe in the country, and they're running like any other governments. They have a lot of services. They have their own health programs and law enforcement, and they're building and growing, and more students are going to college. So there are a lot of positive changes. So out of this, the young students that are growing up have to feel a greater sense of pride in being a Native person than when I was growing up. I mean, I was proud, but I really didn't know why, and I had to struggle and to learn why. So most Native parents should really be more conscious of this and consciously teach some of the history of their tribe and their values. If they know it, they may have to relearn it, because there are a lot of professors in the late 1800s and early 1900s that went out and studied these tribes. So the universities have a lot of data. Columbia University, there were some students and professors that came out and studied the Otoes, and other academicians came out. So some of the raw data is there. And so those tribes that are struggling with some of their own ceremonies and stuff might have to go and learn from what was researched and documented, even if it might not quite be right, but it would be better than not having anything.
It's important to preserve those traditions.
Right, it is very important.
Well, what does Oklahoma mean to you?
Oklahoma, I always feel so happy. It's home. Whenever I cross the line, I just feel, really happy to be, back in Oklahoma. And it's home, and it's also about, I think Oklahoma is also very patriotic, and they're very family-oriented, and a lot of common values in being an American and being an Oklahoman. And then within that, our subculture, the Native people are proud as well. So it's always good to be, in Oklahoma, and I'm very happy to be here, and I love Oklahoma, even though I don't always love the weather.
Well, is there anything else you'd like to add that we have not spoken about today?
Well, I think that this is 2007, and even though there's been a lot of change in across the state and in the various communities, I think that there's still a lot of prejudice in this state against American Indians, and I think a lot of that has to do with several things. One, it has to do with it hasn't been that long since we had the Indian Wars, and people's grandparents can still share stories with their children, and on both sides. So I think there's this kind of, because of that, there's still this carryover of suspicion and mistrust. But there's still a lot of anger among Native people because of, they've been dispossessed. In a lot of ways, they've been dispossessed of their property, and a lot of it was done illegally, in a very devious and crooked manner. And because the Indian people weren't educated, they didn't understand a lot of times, you know, that the form, if they signed, put their X on a piece of paper, then that meant you were selling this land. They didn't understand that. And yet some of the wealth that has come from this state, the Indians are very, you know, they're very poor, and they struggle to live every day. But in the schools, there's, you know, at least the textbook that I had in Oklahoma history is no longer there, and it's probably not as negative as it once was. But they really need to begin to be more balanced in the history, what they present. And while, you know, they may be proud that they had the great land runs of Oklahoma, they got it in a way that wasn't good for us and hasn't been. And they need to know, the history books need to tell the truth, what really happened, and to get rid of some of the stereotypes that people in this state have against Native people. And the Native people need to get over letting themselves, you know, be victims, and to let that defeat them. And they need to just make up their mind that, you know, they're survivors. The expectation was that the Indian cultures would have been wiped out, and they wouldn't have their culture or their languages anymore. But Indians are still here, they still have their culture, they still have their beliefs, but they need to balance that out. They need to be able to balance their values with, you know, the outside world or the dominant society, so that they can function in both worlds. And they need to not accept these definitions, these negative definitions of who they are, that, you know, they are a Native American, and be proud of that, and to go on and move beyond that, and not just accept that, oh, I'm just an Indian and I'm supposed to be poor, and I'm supposed to be a drunk, or I'm supposed to be uneducated, and I can't do this, I can't do that, but make up their mind that, hey, you're strong people. You know, they tried to kill the Indians with just right out by actually killing them. Then they tried to destroy them by taking their land and their culture, and used to whip them for speaking their own language, all this stuff. But we're still here, and we're getting stronger. And they need to be proud of how strong we are. We've survived all of that. And to not be a victim, and to take that and be out there and be who they are, and know that they're equal with anybody else. And I guess that's what I want to see. I'd like to see it because a lot of people in Oklahoma are part Indian, a huge part of being Indian, and they need to learn more about the Native culture and the values, because a lot of them are really there from the Bible. You know, there's a lot of the teachings, what they tell you is respect, you know, reciprocity, generosity, sharing, being good to your neighbor, helping, and but those values, they're not as dominant as they once were, so they need to be, you know, they need to be stronger, and people need to interact more, because they'll recognize that, you know, each culture or race has something to offer the other, and you can really be a better person for learning about, you know, your fellow man, and understanding and appreciating one another for what they bring to, you know, to the world. So I hope that we can begin to see that in the future. And it's more education on both sides, and more giving, and more understanding and appreciation of diversity. But we're not there yet.
You, Della Warrior, are just a remarkable woman, and we do appreciate your time with us today.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.